In Philippians 4, beginning in verse 11, my friend Paul writes this: I have learned to be content in whatever circumstance I am. I know how to get along with humble means, and I know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret. I've learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need. Paul has learned a secret. He's learned the secret of contentment. Now that's a good secret. Don't you just love a good secret? Isn't that a secret you wish you were in on? Wouldn't you like to know the secret of contentment? Content is sometimes translated as sufficient. Sufficient means enough. Content is sufficient. It's satisfied. It's fulfilled. Wouldn't you like to be enough? Wouldn't you like to be sufficient, to be satisfied? Do you ever think that you're not enough? Do you ever feel like you're insufficient? If so, keep listening, because Paul knows a secret about that very thing. Paul reveals the secret of contentment in verse 13. He says, I can do all things through Him who strengthens me. I can do all things through Him who strengthens me. I can do all things. What things? Which things? What is the all things that Paul is referring to? I think Paul is saying that all things means that he can get along with humble means. It means that he knows how to live in prosperity, but he can also be hungry, or he can be full-bellied. What is the all things that Paul's referring to? Regardless of circumstance, he can be content. I can do all things means that he can be rich without being snotty or self-righteous. It means that he can be poor without being pitiful or self-loathing. It means that he can have food without thinking that he's earned that food, and he can be hungry without thinking that he's unworthy of food. Paul says he can endure all things, all circumstances, all present conditions. He can endure health or pandemic. He can endure employment or unemployment. He can serve or he can be served. He can suffer in need or he can dine in abundance. And he can do all these things through Him who gives me strength. If contentment means satisfied or sufficient or fulfilled, then Paul is not saying that he's learned the secret of self-sufficiency or self-satisfaction. No. Paul has learned the secret of surrender. The secret of surrender. Paul has learned the secret that we can never be enough. We can never be sufficient. We can never be satisfied by ourselves. Paul has learned that Jeff Henderson alone or you alone are incapable of contentment. The secret of Paul, the secret that he's learned, is that he can only be satisfied by God, fulfilled by God, sufficient in God, content through Him. In God we trust, and only in God can we ever be enough. But that can only be accomplished when we give up. Did you get that? That can only be accomplished. We can only ever be enough when we give up, when we cease striving, when we surrender, when we stop trying to force our will and push our agenda and meet our own needs. It is only in surrender that we can be content. As long as you keep working for acceptance or striving for approval and popularity and financial security, then you're postponing contentment. As long as you say, I'll be content when? I'll be content when I graduate. I'll be content when I get a good job. I'll be content when I can see my friends again. I'll be content when I buy the things and go to the places. As long as your contentment is contingent on circumstances, you are postponing contentment. But when you surrender your will, surrender your identity, surrender your security, surrender your plans, surrender your self-sufficiency, then God lets you in on a secret. The secret that Paul wrote about to the church in Philippi, but also that he wrote about to the church in Corinth. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, and the Lord has said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I, Paul, will rather boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Therefore, I am well content. Therefore, I am well content with weaknesses. For when I am weak, then I am strong. The secret of contentment is surrender. The secret is saying that God's grace is sufficient. The secret is letting Christ dwell in you, perfecting your weakness. And Christ will dwell in you, but only if you open up some room, only if you empty yourself and make a place for Him. And surrender is not just a one-time decision that we make. It is a moment-by-moment choice to surrender to Him. And in that, we find contentment. My challenge to you today is to do nothing. To sit, breathe, and rest in God's sufficiency.